we're going to talk about sickness, because unfortunately you can't avoid it. It does happen. You do get sick employees, and what we see is that the practices between the different countries are very, very different. In the Netherlands, which is a bit of a shock for a lot of people, so I'm glad you're sitting down. In the Netherlands, you pay salary for 2 years during sickness. It's quite a long time. I see a few shocked looks, yeah. There is a maximum on how much you have to pay by law. So by law, you have to pay at least 70% of the last salary up to a maximum. And the maximum is around, it's the 4,700 a month. It's around 55,000 a year at the moment, and it gets indexed each year. Saying that, a lot of companies in the Netherlands do pay 100% for the first year of sickness and 70% for the second. That is quite a normal practice. So you may think, I'll just go with the basic, do 70%, but then you might find yourself in difficulties trying to compete to get staff because they say, oh no, but with the other company I can get 100%. That gives me more security. So I don't want that. So it can be quite normal to pay 100%, at least up to the maximum. Whether you do above the maximum or not is up to you. We also see different variations. So for example, if I say to a lot of clients, they might say, oh, just do the basic to start with. We're just starting in the Netherlands. We don't want too much of a liability. We'll start with 70%. But that means that every time somebody is sick, you've got to adjust their salary, even if it's just for a day. If you don't do that, you kind of get people can sort of say, well, I thought I was always going to get that amount. You were paid 100% last time when I was off for a week, so why are you not paying 100% now? So to kind of cover that kind of short-term illness that people will go off maybe with flu or whatever for a couple of weeks, we often advise at least say for the first month 100%, then you don't have all the hassle, and then after that, if it's really long-term, then you can always pay the 70. There is an opportunity or possibility to take out an insurance to cover you for the cost of salary during sickness. However, I spoke to somebody about this earlier. If you already have a high sickness percentage within your organisation, the premiums are going to be quite high for that, because generally the insurance will kick in after a waiting time of maybe 1 month or 3 months, and they will refund the amount that you're paying to your employees. So it can be really interesting. Certainly if you're a small startup, you can't, really... you haven't got the funds to pay somebody while they're not there, because you're going to have to replace them with like temps or whatever in that period. Then at least you can keep up your obligations and you can continue to pay them. And then you can use that money to then find a replacement, for example, a temporary replacement, I hasten to add. So with sick leave, a lot of you I've probably already had contact with about sick leave, or my department have, because the sick leave management process is very, very well defined in the Netherlands. There's lots of laws and lots of practices that have to be followed. If you do not follow them properly, and you do not, in the eyes of the UWV, the Employee Insurance Agency, if you haven't done everything you could do to get someone back to work, you could be hit with a wage sanction, which is up to another year of payment. So 3 years in total. So you want to avoid that. And obviously, the longer the person is sick, the longer you're not getting them to work, and it's costing you money. So you want to get them back to work as soon as possible anyway. So I just wanted to highlight the payment side of things, but also just the practice. Okay, so what do you do when you have a sick employee? And what are you allowed to do in that process and whatnot? A few other obligations, I'm afraid. I know it's not happy news. Nobody likes obligations, but they are there. They are in the law. And the first one is that when you have a sick employee, you should register them with your occupational health and safety provider, also known as Arbodienst in the Netherlands. Maybe a show of hands, who already has a occupational health and safety provider? Okay, I see quite a few hands, so that's a good start. What we do notice is that people have them, but they don't register everybody with them, because they think, it's only 1 day, or I'm not sure if they're really sick or if they're working from home. It's another one you hear very often, but you are obliged to register them within 7 days. with the company doctor. That way, also from the company doctor, they will get in contact with the employee if he stays sick for a longer period. They will check what the reason is, because you're not allowed to know, but they are. And they can advise you about what the next step should be, whether they should be seen by the company doctor, or whether something else is going on. So yeah, good to register all cases. It's also important to register all cases because I quite often have clients come to me and they say, oh, I have this employee, they're sick. They've been sick for the last 4 weeks. I think I probably maybe need to do something now. And you say, well, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, we're on time. And then I ask, have they been sick in the month preceding this sickness registration? And then it turns out, well, yeah, they took a few days here and a few days there. And what that does is if it falls within 28 days of each other, they count the earlier date as the start date. So before you know it, actually you're counting back and maybe counting back again. Do you follow what I mean? So if somebody is sick now on the 1st of November, but actually on the 10th of October, he was also sick for a day. And before that, in September, he was also sick on the 30th of October. For this new sickness case from the 1st of November or whatever it was, the employee would be considered sick from that very first date. So as long as there's 28 days between, they all count as one. That means that your start date is much earlier, which means that your obligation to have them seen by a company doctor within 6 weeks counts from the very earliest sickness date and not from the most recent one, even though it was only a day. So it's important to have that history in the system. And to consider that, certainly if you have a long-term case, were they ill in the 28 days before this? If so, were they ill in the 28 days before that? And you keep going back until you get the earliest date. And that counts for your 2 years. That can be an advantage because the 2 years sickness then counts from that earlier date. But also your obligations start playing up before then. Yeah, you have to have the company doctor seen within 6 weeks. And after that, the company doctor would come with an advice. It's usually very vague because they're not allowed, because of medical secrecy, to tell you very much. So you have to read between the lines quite a bit. And they will tell you whether the employee is fit for work or not. Whatever they say, even if they say, no, this person really is sick, really is going to have to stay at home for maybe months, you still have to draft a plan of action with them. Now there's Dutch language forms available on the UWV site. UWV site. We have English language versions that we use for our clients because most of our clients don't speak Dutch, so it's not very helpful to have the form in Dutch. But you do have to appoint a case manager. And a case manager can be somebody from your HR department, it can be a manager, but it is the person who is dedicated to make sure that the process goes well. At Briddge, we act as case manager for our clients. So if you say to us, I have a sick employee, I say, fine, okay, I will make sure they get seen by a company doctor, I will make sure that that plan gets drafted, send it to you, advise you how to fill it in. And then every time the employee goes back to the company doctor afterwards, that's generally every 6 weeks. After that, if anything changes in the action plan, because suddenly they are able to do more, for example, then that needs to, again, be agreed with the employee on paper. And that's something that the case manager does. All of that file you just keep for yourself. At the moment, it doesn't go anywhere. It only is important, really, if the employee stays ill for 2 years, because then they will go to the UWV, and the UWV will say, did your employer and you do enough during your reintegration to come back to work? If the answer is no, and the answer will be no quite quickly if you haven't kept to all these deadlines and haven't signed all the forms on time, then you could get the wage sanction of an extra year, so a third year of payment, which obviously you don't want and we don't want for you. So it's very important to have that file, well documented, regular contact moments with the employee. We would do that as case manager, or you should do it as case manager. But even if you have outsourced your case management to us, as an employer, please still keep regular contact with your employees. It's really important for them just to have a feeling, that someone cares, that they can come back to work at some point. And ultimately, as an employer, you are responsible. So even if, theoretically, if we mess it up and don't have enough contact, ultimately, it was in your charge, so you will be held responsible and you will receive the wage sanction at the end of the second year. So we will help you with that. We will partner with you in that. We will speak to the company doctor before consultation sometimes to steer them a little bit, like, I think this is going on and I got this impression from this person. Can you make sure you really ask about this aspect? And they will do that. But yeah, it helps if you know how the system works and know what the role is of a company doctor, what they can say, what they can't say. So that's why it's often, an added value service to have it just outsourced. And, generally, I think most of you just people don't really want to be dealing with that. You want to be running your business, and it's kind of an extra hassle. So it goes on and on and on. We have memos that can inform you of all the exact steps that you have to take at which time. At this 42nd week, you have to inform the UWV that you've got a sick employee. First year, you have to have an evaluation. The second year, you have to start looking at, okay, well, where are we? What is the situation? Do we think we're actually going to be able to reintegrate you within the next year in our own company, or do we actually need to start up what's called a second track reintegration? Outside of the company, so maybe in different type of work, and in which case you need to have started that already in the second year. If you haven't started it in the second year, again, you could get the wage sanction that says, well, no, you didn't do this, so now you've got to do it anyway, and you've got to pay salary while you're doing it. Ultimately, the government, the UWV, just doesn't want people to end up having benefits when it's the fault of the employer. So they will come back to you if ever they can. We've discussed some of these things, what not to do. Felina mentioned in her presentation that you cannot fire sick employees. So if you have an employee that is sick, you shouldn't start talking about termination, because then they can say, no, well, I'm sick, and you can't go there. And of course, the fact that they know that as soon as they come back to work, you're going to talk to them about this, it could be a reason for them to stay off sick longer. So you have to be very, very careful if somebody is sick, if you have just announced to somebody you're not extending their contract, or that you're planning on terminating an indefinite contract. A tactic can be, next day, I just register sick. It's all too much for me. I had bad news yesterday. Make sure you let us know about that, because then it's very important to get the person seen by a company doctor straight away to determine, is there real medical sickness here, or are they just kind of angry, and frustrated? And then we can also, or the case manager can then inform the company doctor of what's happened, so the company doctor can ask the right questions. Because otherwise they just go there and they say, are you sick? Yeah, I'm really stressed. Oh, okay then. Then that's not very useful. So it's good to know all of those kind of the situation around it, but not to push the issue of termination during sickness. Make sure you get legal advice first. Don't ignore the advice of the company doctor, I think is what I answered to Rosemarie's question. If they advise to do something, you have to have a very good reason not to do it. On occasion, I have had a company doctor that has advised that somebody could come back for 8 hours a day. And when I spoke to the person, they were like, oh no, I just don't know how I'm going to do it. And, from knowing that person, I knew the story. And I thought, I doubt this as well. I think this might be a wrong advice. In that case, you can get a second opinion. You can send them either back to the same company doctor, a different company doctor, or somebody completely external, or get a second opinion from the UWV. Likewise, if the company doctor says, you can build up 2 hours a day, but the employee says, I think I can do 8, that you've got, don't just do, although it's good that the employee is so keen, but it might actually set them back further. So if you have any doubt, try to stick to the company doctor's advice as much as possible. Once people start reintegrating, you have a little bit of leeway to say, okay, we agreed that you would build up an hour extra per day each week. We're going to miss a week with the build-up because it's actually a bit much for you. You have that leeway, but don't deviate too much without getting a second opinion or an opinion from the company doctor. Stopping salary or employee benefits. Some of our employers, again, different cultures, used to different things. They're like, well, they're sick, so I just stop everything. I stop their car allowance and I stop paying them salary and stopping everything. That's going to get you in a really, really difficult situation. So don't do that without thinking carefully about, can I actually do this? Even if it's a cost reimbursement, commute costs, there's certain rules that are usually applied for when you can stop that. It's not always immediately. If the employee doesn't do their part and doesn't work on reintegrating, isn't willing to cooperate, then you can use that as a means to exert pressure. So you can stop or suspend salary, but again, be very careful and get legal advice before doing so, to be sure. Another one, long-term disability. Sometimes, small company, they've only got 3 or 4 people, somebody goes off sick, the work still needs to be done. So they think, well, I don't think that person's going to come back for at least 6 months, so I'm just going to take on somebody else on a year contract to do that work. Of course, then you get the situation that the person comes back to work and the employer says, I actually haven't got any work for you because this person's now doing it. You can't do that. You do have to have that flexibility and keep the opportunity, the original position open as long as the employee is expected to return in their own work. And that is decided by the company doctor. So again, you could kind of make your case very difficult by permanently replacing them. So we'd say, okay, fine, if you need to replace somebody, but then you might need to do a temporary replacement rather than a long-term replacement. And again, don't lose contact with the employee during long-term illness. That really can make it difficult for the employee to come back later, even though you feel like sometimes it's a bit of a, oh yeah, I'm going to ring them again and say, how is it? They say it's the same, and then you don't really know what to say, and it can be a little bit awkward sometimes. But even if it's just by app or whatever, just keep contact with them, show that you're interested. I hear from a lot of employees that they're like, nobody's really interested in me. The first couple of weeks, everybody was apping me, and now I think I've been forgotten, kind of thing. And that can be really demotivating for somebody that is ill. And as an employer, you are responsible for keeping that relationship warm. So you do need to keep that warm, even if you have a case manager. Yeah, the employee, as I said, they have obligations as well, not as many maybe. They need to cooperate with the whole process of getting the action plan together with reasonable instructions from the company doctor. They need to attend the appointments with the company doctor where possible. In our practice, quite often then you have a lot of foreign employees that might be like, yeah, but I'm ill, so I've gone back to my home country because there I have a doctor I trust, and you get a whole story, but they are still obliged really to come back to the Netherlands and be seen by the company doctor. That can't be a reason because they are employed here. But again, it's just a matter of pointing out really what you expect of them. Preferably in your staff handbook or employee handbook, if you have one, that says, you're expected to be available for appointments. You're not going to just turn around and say, oh no, I can't do that day. It's like, well, what do you mean you can't do that day? We're paying you, you're at home. Of course, they might have conflicting therapy sessions or something like that, and they can reschedule. But yeah, they have to cooperate. They really do have to cooperate, and they have a responsibility to seek suitable medical care. And the company doctor will always ascertain whether they think that the care is suitable or not. So sometimes they might say, I'm not sure they're doing all they could do. Actually, they need to go and see a psychologist, but they're refusing. Then they're not doing everything they can, and they could be held liable for that. So that's something you need to be aware of. What they should not do is undertake activities that prevent or slow down recovery. So like going, if you're on your skiing holiday with your knee problem, is probably not really helping your recovery. Other things could be that you discover that somebody is actually doing lots of hobbies or things next to work, which are actually aggravating their complaints that they're off for. That could be an issue. It's not always an issue. I think for a lot of our foreign for people from other cultures, they find it very difficult that somebody who's here 100% ill can say, oh yeah, but don't bring me on Friday evening at 5 o'clock because I'm going out for dinner with friends. And they feel like they shouldn't be allowed to go out for dinner with friends. It doesn't work like that in the Netherlands. That is actually considered to be quite a good thing to do, you know, to keep contact with people, and it's actually going to help your recovery. But it's a culture difference. So be careful in judging that, though, maybe, and thinking that they're slowing down recovery when actually they're just kind of trying to have some kind of life or whatever. If the employee really doesn't do anything, I said you can stop salary, you can suspend salary, with the difference being that you don't pay it out for the moment, but as soon as they start complying, you do pay it backdated, and stopping would be to stop it completely. But really you need to be seen first to give warnings, you know, or if the employee is not available, if they haven't responded to 3 calls from the company doctor, that you think, yeah, but hang on, where are you? You know, then you have to start sending letters and warning. Preferably first a warning and then take more drastic measures so you build up. And get a legal advice before doing so to make sure that you're not coming down on too hard on them in the eyes of Dutch law, because that could again work against you.